After my dad got sick, my stepmom and stepsister were always partying and planning to take his money after he died. I overheard Evelyn say, "Once he's gone, this house and everything in it will be ours. You'll have nothing." I snapped and started gathering evidence, recordings, bank statements, even a fake will they'd made. Evelyn begged. We didn't mean it. We were just stressed, but it was too late. The house used to feel like a home. Now it felt like a war zone. Every corner was filled with tension, every conversation laced with venom. But tonight was different. Tonight, the mask slipped completely, and the truth came crashing down like a tidal wave. I was in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner, when I heard Evelyn's voice rise from the living room. "Why do we even bother pretending anymore?" she snapped, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. I froze, the dish in my hand hovering over the sink. My heart started to race. I knew that tone. It was the one she used when she was about to unleash something cruel. Clara's voice followed, smooth and mocking. "Because Dad's still here. We have to keep up the act, remember? For his sake." I set the dish down quietly and crept closer to the doorway, my stomach churning. I shouldn't have listened. I should have walked away. But I couldn't. Something in their voices, something dark and unhinged, pulled me in. "For his sake." Evelyn let out a bitter laugh. "Please, that man is a shell of what he used to be. He's not even a person anymore, just a burden." And her. She paused, and I could practically feel her venomous gaze darting toward the kitchen. "She's worse. Always hovering, always playing the perfect daughter. It's disgusting." My chest tightened. I wanted to storm in there, to scream at them, to make them take it back. But I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, my breath caught in my throat. Clara sighed, as if she were the one being inconvenienced. "I know, but we just have to be patient. Once he's gone, we can finally get rid of her too. She'll have no claim to anything. The house, the money, it'll all be ours." The words hit me like a slap. My vision blurred, and I had to grip the doorframe to steady myself. They were talking about my father like he was already dead, like his life, his love, his sacrifices meant nothing to them. Evelyn's voice softened, but it wasn't comforting. It was calculating. "We'll sell the house, of course. It's too big for just the two of us. And with the money, we can finally live the way we deserve. No more pretending. No more playing nice." Clara giggled, the sound cold and hollow. "I can't wait to redecorate. This place is so outdated. And once we have the money, we can travel. Europe, maybe, or the Maldives. Somewhere far away from all of this." I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped into the living room, my hands trembling at my sides. "How can you say that?" My voice shook, but it was loud enough to make them both jump. "He's still here. He's still fighting. And you're already planning his funeral?" Evelyn turned to me, her eyes narrowing. For a moment, she looked almost guilty. But then her lips curled into a sneer. "Oh, please, don't act like you're so innocent. You've been waiting for this just as much as we have." "That's not true," I shouted, my voice breaking. "I love him. He's my father. I would never." "Spare me the theatrics," Evelyn interrupted, rolling her eyes. "You're just like your mother, always playing the victim. But guess what? She's gone, and soon, so will he. And you'll be nothing. Just a sad little girl with no one to cry to." Clara smirked, leaning back on the couch like she was watching a show. "Face it, you're a ghost in this house. Always have been. And when he's gone, you'll disappear completely." The room spun around me. I felt like I was drowning, their words crashing over me in waves. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to make them feel even a fraction of the pain they were causing. But I couldn't. Instead, I turned and ran up the stairs, down the hall, and into my room. I slammed the door behind me and collapsed onto my bed, my chest heaving. The tears came then, hot and uncontrollable. But even as I cried, a fire began to burn inside me. They thought they could break me. They thought they could take everything from me. But they were wrong. I wiped my face and sat up, my hands still shaking, but my mind clear. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them destroy my father's legacy or my future. The cracks in our family had been growing for years, but tonight they shattered completely. And as I sat there in the darkness, I made a promise to myself. I would expose their lies. I will make them pay. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the photograph in my hands. It was an old picture, faded at the corners, but the memory it held was still vivid. My father, healthy and smiling, stood with his arm around my mother. I was there too, just a little girl, grinning up at them like they were my entire world. Back then, life was simple. Back then, we were happy. But that was before the cancer, before Evelyn, before everything fell apart. I set the photo down and leaned back against the headboard, letting my mind drift to the day Evelyn and Clara entered our lives. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance for my father to find happiness again after my mother's death. I remembered how Evelyn had smiled at me during their first dinner together, her voice sweet and reassuring. "We're going to be a family now," she'd said. "You, me, Clara, and your dad. We'll take care of each other." I had believed her. I had wanted to believe her. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show. At first, it was small things. Evelyn would make comments about how I dressed, how I spoke, how I spent my time. "You should really try to be more like Clara," she'd say, her tone dripping with false concern. "She's so poised, so mature for her age." Clara, of course, ate it up. She'd smirk at me from across the table, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. It was like a game to her, a competition I didn't even know I was part of. Then came the isolation. Evelyn started making decisions without consulting me, canceling my piano lessons, rearranging my room, even donating my mother's old clothes without asking. "You don't need these things anymore," she'd say, her voice firm. "It's time to move on." But I couldn't move on. Not when every change felt like another piece of my mother being erased. Not when every decision felt like another step toward being pushed out of my own family. My father tried to intervene, but he was already starting to get sick. The cancer had been diagnosed just a few months after Evelyn moved in, and it consumed everything. The treatments, the hospital visits, the endless cycle of hope and despair. It left him weak and distracted. He didn't see what was happening right in front of him. Or maybe he did, but he was too tired to fight. I remembered one night, not long after his diagnosis, when I had gone to him, tears streaming down my face. "Evelyn hates me," I'd said. "She's always criticizing me, always comparing me to Clara. I don't know what to do." He had looked at me with such sadness in his eyes, but all he said was, "Give it time, sweetheart. She's just trying to adjust. We all are." But time didn't fix anything. It only made it worse. As the years passed, Evelyn and Clara became bolder. They started excluding me from family events, making plans without me, even taking over my father's care. "You're too young to handle this," Evelyn would say whenever I tried to help. "Let's take care of it." And I let them. Because what choice did I have? I was just a teenager trying to navigate a world that felt like it was crumbling around me. But now, as I sat there in my room, the echoes of their cruel words still ringing in my ears, I realized something. I wasn't that little girl anymore. I wasn't helpless, and I wasn't going to let them win. I stood up and walked over to my desk, pulling out a notebook. If they wanted to play games, I would play too. But this time, I would be the one holding the cards. I started writing down everything. Every cruel comment, every act of exclusion, every moment of manipulation. I documented their plans, their lies, their greed. And as I wrote, a plan began to form in my mind. They thought they could take everything from me. They thought they could erase me from my own family. But they were wrong. This was my story, and I wasn't going to let them write the ending. The days after the confrontation in the living room were a blur. Evelyn and Clara acted as if nothing had happened, their smiles as fake as their concern for my father. But I wasn't fooled. I had seen the truth, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I started quietly, gathering evidence piece by piece. I recorded their conversations whenever I could, my phone hidden in my pocket or tucked under a cushion. At first, it was just snippets, Evelyn complaining about my father's medical bills, Clara whining about how long it was taking for him to finally go. But then one night I struck gold. They were in the dining room, glasses of wine in hand, their voices low but clear. I stood just outside the door, my phone recording every word. "Once he's gone," Evelyn said, her tone casual, as if they were discussing the weather, "we'll sell the house immediately. No point in keeping it. It's too big for just the two of us, and the market is good right now." Clara giggled. "Finally, I'm so tired of this place. It's like a museum, stuck in the past. And with the money, we can buy something modern. Maybe a penthouse downtown." "Exactly," Evelyn replied. "And we'll take a trip too, somewhere far away. We've earned it, after putting up with him and her." My hands clenched into fists, but I forced myself to stay quiet. This was what I needed, proof of their greed, their callousness. Over the next few weeks, I collected more. I found bank statements showing large withdrawals from my father's accounts, receipts for expensive purchases Evelyn had made without his knowledge. I even discovered a draft of a new will they had drawn up, one that cut me out completely and left everything to them. But I didn't stop there. I reached out to my father's lawyer, Mr. Daniels, who had been a close friend of his for years. At first, he was hesitant to get involved. "This is a family matter," he said gently. "Are you sure you want to go down this road?" "I don't have a choice," I replied, my voice steady. "They're going to destroy him, destroy everything he's worked for. I can't let that happen." Mr. Daniels sighed, but agreed to help. Together, we began building a case, one that would expose Evelyn and Clara for who they really were. The final piece of the puzzle came during a family dinner. It was supposed to be a quiet evening, just the four of us, but I knew it would be anything but. My father was feeling stronger that day, and Evelyn had insisted on cooking his favorite meal. She was laying it on thick, her smile sickly sweet as she doted on him. "You're looking so much better," she said, patting his hand. "I think the new treatment is really working." My father smiled weakly, but I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. He didn't know what was coming. None of them did. I waited until dessert was served before I made my move. "I think there's something we need to talk about," I said, my voice calm but firm. Evelyn frowned. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. "I think you'll want to hear this." I hit play, and their voices filled the room. "Once he's gone, we'll sell the house immediately. No point in keeping it. Finally, I'm so tired of this place. And with the money, we can buy something modern. Maybe a penthouse downtown." The color drained from Evelyn's face. Clara's mouth fell open, her fork clattering to her plate. My father stared at the phone, his expression a mix of shock and heartbreak. "What is this?" Evelyn demanded, her voice shaking. "How dare you? How dare I?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "How dare you? You've been planning this for months, maybe even years. You don't care about him. You never did. All you care about is his money." Clara tried to speak, but I cut her off. "And you," I said, turning to her. "You've been laughing behind his back this whole time. You think you're so clever, but you're just as guilty as she is." I turned to my father, my heart breaking at the pain in his eyes. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I didn't want to hurt you, but you needed to know the truth." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Evelyn slammed her hands on the table. "This is ridiculous," she spat. "You're twisting things, making up lies." "It's not lies," Mr. Daniels said, stepping into the room. He had been waiting in the hallway, just as we had planned. "I've seen the evidence. The bank statements, the will, the recordings. It's all there." Evelyn's face turned red with rage. "You have no right." "I have every right," my father interrupted, his voice stronger than I had heard it in months. He looked at Evelyn, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "I trusted you. I loved you. And this is how you repay me." Evelyn opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Clara looked like she wanted to disappear. I sat back, my heart pounding, but a sense of relief washed over me. The truth was out. Finally, the truth was out. The fallout was immediate. Evelyn and Clara's carefully constructed facade crumbled like a house of cards. The recordings, the bank statements, the draft of the will, it was all too much for them to explain away. My father, though weak and heartbroken, finally saw them for who they truly were. The days that followed were a whirlwind of tension and tears. Evelyn tried to backtrack, her voice trembling as she pleaded with my father. "It's not what it looks like," she said, her hands clutching his. "You have to believe me. I would never." "Stop," my father interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. He pulled his hand away, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and resolve. "I've heard enough. I've seen enough. You've been lying to me, to all of us, for years. I can't pretend anymore." Clara, usually so confident and smug, was uncharacteristically silent. She sat on the couch, her arms crossed, staring at the floor. But when my father turned to her, she finally spoke. "Dad, don't," he said, cutting her off. "You're not my daughter. Not anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Clara's face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw something real in her eyes, regret. But it was too late. The damage was done. Evelyn, desperate now, turned to me. "Please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "You have to understand. We didn't mean it. We were just stressed, scared. We didn't know what we were saying." I stared at her, my heart pounding, but my resolve unshaken. "You meant every word," I said quietly, "and you would have gone through with it. You would have taken everything from him, from me, without a second thought." She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. Instead, she sank to her knees, sobbing. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." But her apologies rang hollow. They weren't sorry for what they had done. They were sorry they had been caught. My father, though devastated, took action. With Mr. Daniels' help, he revoked Evelyn's access to his accounts and change his will, ensuring that she and Clara would never benefit from his death. He also began the process of filing for divorce, something I never thought I'd see him do. "I should have listened to you sooner," he said to me one evening, his voice heavy with regret. "I should have seen what was happening. I'm so sorry, sweetheart." I reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "It's not your fault," I said. "You were sick. You trusted them. They're the ones who betrayed that trust." He nodded, but I could see the guilt in his eyes. It broke my heart, but I knew he needed to hear the truth. As for Evelyn and Clara, they tried everything to win him back. They begged, they pleaded, they even tried to manipulate him with tears and promises. But my father stood firm. "You show me who you really are," he told them one final time. And I can't forgive that. The day they moved out was bittersweet. I watched as they packed their things, their faces pale and drawn. Evelyn tried one last time to apologize, but I turned away. I didn't want to hear it. Clara, on the other hand, didn't say a word. She just glared at me as she carried her bags to the car, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and shame. When they were finally gone, the house felt different, lighter somehow, but it was also quieter, emptier. My father and I sat together in the living room, neither of us speaking. There was so much to process, so much to heal from. But for the first time in years, I felt a sense of hope. The truth had been exposed, and justice had been served. Evelyn and Clara's reign of manipulation was over. The house felt different after Evelyn and Clara left. The air was lighter, the silence more peaceful, but there was an emptiness too, a void where their toxicity had once festered. My father and I spent those first few days in quiet companionship, neither of us needing to say much. We were both healing in our own ways. But as the weeks passed, I began to feel restless. The walls of the house, once my sanctuary, now felt like a cage. Every room held memories, some good, but many tainted by the years of manipulation and betrayal. I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to leave, to start over somewhere far away from all of this. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, I finally broached the subject. "Dad," I began, my voice tentative, "I've been thinking I need to go, just for a while, to figure things out." He looked at me, his eyes filled with understanding. "I figured you might say that," he said softly. "Where will you go?" I shrugged. "I'm not sure yet. Maybe the city. Maybe somewhere completely new. I need to get away from here. From all of this." He nodded, his expression a mix of sadness and pride. "I get it," he said. "You've been through so much. You deserve a fresh start." Tears welled in my eyes, but I blinked them away. "I don't want to leave you," I said, my voice breaking. "Not after everything." He reached out and took my hand, his grip firm despite his frailty. "You're not leaving me," he said. "You're finding yourself, and I'll always be here, no matter where you go." The next few days were a whirlwind of packing and planning. I didn't take much, just the essentials and a few keepsakes, including the old photograph of my mother and father. It was a reminder of where I came from, but also of where I was going. The morning of my departure, my father walked me to the door. He looked older somehow, his face lined with the weight of everything we'd been through. But there was a quiet strength in his eyes, a resilience that gave me hope. "Take care of yourself," he said, pulling me into a tight hug. "And don't forget, you're stronger than you think." "I'll call you," I promised, my voice muffled against his shoulder. "Every day." He smiled as I pulled away, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Go," he said gently. "Live your life." I stepped out the door and into the crisp morning air, my bag slung over my shoulder. I didn't look back as I walked to the car. I couldn't. If I did, I might lose my nerve. As I drove away, the house grew smaller in the rearview mirror until it disappeared completely. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of freedom, a lightness in my chest that I hadn't realized was missing. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know where I would end up or what I would do. But I knew one thing for certain. I was done living in the shadows of Evelyn and Clara's cruelty. I was done letting their lies define me. This was my life now, my story, and I was going to write it on my own terms. As the road stretched out ahead of me, I felt a smile tug at my lips. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I felt free. And I was never looking back.